Hey everyone, today we're going to be doing another update video on this PSA Freedom Kit. If you haven't seen the first part in this Broke to Boujee series, or at least as I'm calling it now, go ahead and follow the link in the description to that first video. It'll make basically this video will make a whole lot more sense if you have the kind of foundational understanding of what I'm trying to do with this series. Just the Cliff Notes version. Basically, I know a lot of people out there are running really cheap builds that they picked up during the pandemic from companies like Palmetto State Armory, and I want to get an idea of what you can realistically expect performance-wise out of one of these. The first video, we had kind of a limited budget of $500, and in this video, we're upping that a little bit. Basically, if you have one of those basic GI style, M4 style guns, and you have another $200 or so to invest into it to make it better, what is the wisest way, in my opinion, to spend that money? And that's what we have represented here, and we're going to talk about how it has performed in this configuration before moving on to the next set of upgrades. And I had a lot of critiques in that first video, basically criticizing my decision to completely disassemble the gun and reassemble it myself, just to hopefully articulate why. And you don't have to agree with me, but just to, again, help you understand why I made that decision. Basically, I wanted as few excuses for this thing to not run as possible. I wanted to set it up for the most success possible. That way, if there were failures, it couldn't be blamed on, a Friday afternoon build by some guy in South Carolina who just wanted to get home. I wanted it to be an accurate representation of the performance of the parts in this build. Now, for all I know, straight out of the box, this thing would have run exactly the same as it is now. But again, I just wanted to remove any doubt whatsoever. I am of the opinion that if you are new to the firearms world, probably building guns isn't a good first step, because you're not going to be able to adequately gauge how well something is put together. You can have all the knowledgeable friends you want, but having worked at a gun store, I've seen a lot of knowledgeable friends who know less than the person that they're going to the store with. So being able to properly evaluate things is hard to do if you don't have a basis of knowledge, like taking an armorer's course. So buying from a reputable brand is a good idea, and hopefully this video series will help us understand whether or not you can consider PSA in one of those reputable brands. And if you want to get into the whole built versus bought video, let me know. I can make a separate topic on that. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds in this video. But anyway, that's my opinion there. I've just basically seen a lot of issues with people building their first ones when they don't have any knowledge, even when they have a expert that helps them through the process. So in that first video, we were running it just in that real basic configuration. That's something we'll touch on here in a second. And we ran 500 rounds through it over the course of about 2 hours. Got this thing super hot, again, in that basic kind of M4 style configuration, and this thing ran flawlessly. So it came time to build in some upgrades. And again, part of my goal being here, letting you guys know what my personal opinion is in how those upgrades should go. So you have $500 into the core gun with iron sights and a sling. Let's talk about where you put that first $200 investment into your gun. And to me, it is adding a white light to the gun. I know a lot of people were saying add a red dot. Red dots are great. This thing will have a red dot at some point. However, having iron sights, I have a way of sighting this thing during the day. However, only during the day. That now, especially in the winter and fall and early spring next year, is going to mean less than 12 hours a day that I can adequately use these sights or even a red dot. So adding a white light now adds immensely how much more I can use this thing throughout the day. You don't always get to pick the time or place that you need to use something like this. So having the ability to use this thing at night or in a low light environment, or even inside of a building with poor lighting, this is going to be extremely important. So the light that we went with is the Streamlight ProTac HLX. This is a 1,000 lumen weapon mounted rifle light that's got the same bolt pattern as the Surefire Scout style lights. Now, They do have two other versions of this light. They have the Rail Mount 1, which I've done a video on a long time ago. They also have the Rail Mount 2. The HLX is a little bit bigger and thicker and a little bit more expensive, but really the cost difference is not that much between the smallest and the largest, so I figured let's just go all out, go with the HLX. Regular retail price, like street price on these, is $140. However, I have seen these as cheap as $100 before, and that includes the pressure pad here. Now, to mount the light to the handguard, I went with the Magpul Cantilever Scout mount for M-LOK. I didn't want to do Picatinny rail or anything like that. I wanted to kick this thing further forward, give my hand more to grab onto, and also reduce the shadowing off of the barrel. So the light, again, about 140 bucks at the most, 100 bucks on the low end, mounts about 30 bucks. And then to mount the M-LOK, I had to have an M-LOK handguard. So we have the Magpul MOVSL M-LOK handguard for the carbine length gas system. And that, again, about 30 bucks. Now, because we had to lose our sling mount with the SL handguard, I went ahead and added a BCM M-LOK QD socket there, and then a QD swivel to attach the sling back up here again. All said and done, just over $200 for what I would have paid for it. Some of the parts I already had. But if you're patient and thrifty, you can easily add this entire section up here for under $200. And again, now add to being able to use this gun 24 hours a day, at least in some capacity. So, how did this thing perform? First of all, I should mention that this is actually the third configuration of light set up on this handguard. I went through two other variations of this, as we'll go over here in a second. So the first way I had the light set up was I wanted to basically keep this as simple as possible. So I had the light mounted on the exact same mount, but on the left-hand side of the gun. And then I had the regular push-button tail cap instead of the pressure pad. I wanted to avoid the pressure pad as much as possible. However, I ran into two issues there. First of all, I was negligently discharging the light constantly. Basically, I'm so used to having a momentary pressure pad or a momentary tail cap that I was actuating the light when I did not intend it to, or leaving the light on longer than I intended to. And if you've never taken a low light, no light training class, it's something you need to do, but basically you should really only have that light on when you need it and no longer, because it's a big old beacon saying, here's where I'm at. So, and if I tried to like half press the button, the recoil would cause it to go back into my thumb, and then constantly leave it on, which would then make me not realize it, and then I had to click it again. Long story short, if I can choose between momentary only and constant only, and those are my only two choices, I would rather have momentary only. I know there's a lot of people who have way more experience than I do who say something different, but based on my experiences so far, which is a lot less than theirs, I prefer momentary only. So that being said, I decided to, and the second issue I had with having the light on the left-hand side of the gun was, as a right-handed shooter, I like to shoot around the right-hand side of cover. It's just using my strong side. However, when I have the light on this side of the gun, as soon as my muzzle clears cover, I don't want to come out any further from cover than I have to. What that means is I now have a light bouncing mostly off of the barricade I'm behind, and less, and reflecting back on my eyes, and less on the target downrange. So that does two things. First of all, I'm putting less light down range, and simultaneously by the light bouncing back into my eyes are adjusting for the amount of light coming in. So as soon as I turn my light off, I can't see as well. And while the light is on, the area downrange is darker than the area right in front of me, meaning I have a harder time discerning what's downrange in front of me. Now, there are workarounds for that. There are ways of fixing that. And if I didn't have a 1,000 lumen light, it would be still an issue, but not as much of an issue. But basically for me, it's just way more convenient having it on the right-hand side. However, by putting it on the right-hand side as it is now, I need a pressure pad to be able to run it. Thankfully, these come with a pressure pad. So the first method I decided to do was using zip ties, holding it to the top of the upper handguard here. I had some wariness about that because I was worried about the gas tube burning through the the pressure pad or through the zip ties holding it on. And lo and behold, that is exactly what happened once I did that. So first night, ran it on the left-hand side in the low light, no light, ran great. The gun ran great, but the light left some things to be desired. So then I went out to the range again yesterday, put another 150 rounds through this thing. And again, after about 3 mags, I found that the rear of the pressure pad was kind of loose, and I went and grabbed the zip tie, and it had completely melted through and came all the way off. So I'm glad I did this little heat test because the rear zip tie that was holding the tape switch on has now melted through, out, as has the front one, it seems. Oh, no, it's just loose since it doesn't have the rear one to retain it anymore. So I'm gonna hopefully experiment with that and see if I can find out a better solution, like maybe a Ranger band all the way around the outside. See if that'll hold it steady enough. We'll find out. However, the front zip tie remained strong. However, one more mag through the gun, and that then failed as well. And then the tape switch is just kind of dangling off the gun, completely, relatively, realistically unusable. So my concerns did play out. That failed. However, again, that's something like going back to my perspective in the first video, getting out and actually training with your gun, getting it hot, continuing to shoot it while it's hot is going to cause those issues to become apparent. If you're just shooting, you know, maybe a mag at a time and slow fire at that, you're never going to push that thing to its failure point, and you're never going to learn that that's again a potential issue. And then when you are in a fight for your life and you are going through more rounds than you originally expected, that's where things fail, and that's the last time you want to find out problems like that. So what I've done now, as you'll see, and I'll roll in a close-up picture, I have now Ranger banded this thing on, basically bike inner tube tire, cut it down to the sizes I wanted, a larger one to hold the bulk of the body and also the excess cable, and then another one around the front to keep that indexed, and again do a little bit of cable management. And based on my experience with Ranger bands in the past, this should do just fine with heat, albeit trapping a little bit more of it in, but the handguard does a good job of that anyway. So we'll see how this holds up. We're obviously doing a lot more shooting with this, and if that proves to be an issue, you'll see that in later videos, but I'm cautiously optimistic about the way it's set up right now. Now, one of the other things I did that you may or may not have been able to notice from where you're at behind the camera there, I did have some issues doing shoulder transitions with this gun in its original configuration, because basically where the sling was attached to the stock back here kept coming loose, and that kept it from being able to swivel properly when going from one shoulder to another. So what I did is I basically safety pinned all the keepers in their place and then wrapped it in duct tape so I don't, you know, have those safety pins come loose, and that has kept everything nice and tight. I did a lot of shoulder transitions yesterday when I was shooting this thing, and the sling was not an issue at all there. And this is something I've done on other slings previously, but it again felt prudent to do it on these guys. So again, basically keeping this keeper where it's at, I safety pin the excess sling and then tape around that. That also keeps this from coming loose. And then again back here where it attaches to the stock, it did the same thing, again to prevent the sling from coming loose under use. And again, that's worked for me on other guns before. So as I briefly alluded to, this thing has now gotten another 330 rounds through it, so a total of 830 rounds through this gun so far, and we have still experienced 0 issues. It is worth mentioning that I did thoroughly clean the inside of the receiver and the inside of the barrel after that first 500 rounds, mostly so I could evaluate to see if there's any abnormal wear on the bolt carrier group or anything like that, or in the upper receiver, barrel extension, anything like that, like rounding of bolt lugs, and there was none of that. Again, at least not so far. 500 rounds wasn't a ton. But again, I just wanted to properly evaluate how things were going. I know there are people who would love to see this thing go until it fails from not cleaning. That's not really my goal with this series. Again, I want to see what people can realistically expect with their budget build. And again, in my opinion, you should be giving this thing regular preventative maintenance. and we'll see how the parts wear under those circumstances. But again, 830 rounds through this thing and no issues at all. And while that's not a ton in the grand scheme of things, that is probably more than most people who have bought a rifle like this have put through their gun. Obviously, this thing has a lot of rounds still in its future, hopefully a class or two in its future as well. And we'll just continue to track through and give you guys updates as we go. Now, my next intended path of upgrades is in the optics category. Now that we've got the white light, I feel like we can get a little bit more into the nice to haves, and that's probably going to involve a red dot of some sort. I've kind of already got one picked out, but if you guys have recommendations, let me know in the comments, and then we'll continue to go from there. Ergonomically, is this thing perfect? No. A lot of people don't love the standard M4 stock. A lot of people don't love the A2 pistol grip. There's a lot of people who love to upgrade the trigger. But again, we're looking for a functional, practical gun that gives us all of the core need-to-haves. And while those ergonomics may not be perfect, they are perfectly serviceable. And I think there is much better things to spend money on. In my opinion, there is no reason to spend $60 on a nicer stock when I don't have a weapon light of any sort. There's no reason to spend $250 on a, admittedly, some of the best triggers on the market like a Geisley when I don't have a good white light. Once you have the core need-to-haves, then we can start looking at that. But to kind of prove a point, I'm probably going to leave this in this style configuration as long as possible. But again, next step is probably going to be a red dot. So definitely stay tuned for the following update video, which should be putting us over 1,000 rounds at that point. So if you haven't already and you want to stay clued into what is going on with our budget or broke to bougie build, definitely subscribe down below the video. If you have recommendations or suggestions or tests that you want to see me do within a realistic scope of expectations, definitely let me know. It is worth mentioning. Once again, all of the rounds fired have been through these stainless steel Duramags, and they have continued to chug and chug and chug. The last thing I want when I'm doing a project like this is let the magazines be a potential point of failure and lead me to believe that something in the gun is the problem. And these Duramags have been 100% through all the testing I've done with them so far, hence why I am resorting to only using these during the core testing of this gun. And again, everything is going very, very well. I do want to say thanks to my patrons for helping to make a video like this one possible. While I did get the kit provided from PSA minus the lower receiver, the ammo is definitely not something that I can be too frivolous with right now, and all of that comes from my support over on Patreon. So if you want to be able to see this thing go through even more rounds, supporting me on Patreon is a good way to help make that happen. I'll have links below in the description box for that. You can also, buying t-shirts through my Teespring store helps too, but I know a lot of people don't like to do that. So if you guys, again, have any questions, comments, or concerns, throw them in the comment section down below. But anyway, with all that being said, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching. All right, so first, before you start shooting again, what were your thoughts about having to transition with the light the way it is?
It's like a really unnatural way to hold my hand, so I don't feel like I'm getting like the best support of the, end of the gun. Um, it's sometimes hard to tell when the constant on is activating under recoil. I'm trying to hold it momentary, but then I go momentary, I let off and start transitioning, and then I'm like, oh, that's on still. Fuck.
Yeah.
Um, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, and that's exactly what my findings have been so far as well. This is the first I'm actually getting out with it though.
Like, actually, I think that a way that I can kind of circumvent that issue is instead of having the pad of my thumb on the actual rubber switch itself, to have my thumb on the outside of like the rear bezel, to have the tip of my thumb there, and then use my like more like meaty thumb pad part to activate the pressure.
Huh, interesting. All right.
Try that this time.
Yeah, okay, so this time just do like start the center two and then the outer two, 4 shots each.
Okay. You good?
Yep.
That was way better. I mean, it's not any less awkward, but I don't know if you can see that. I started out having my thumb like that, and then I moved to having my thumb rest on this bezel right here, and then was pressing forward with the middle of my thumb pad, and it wasn't activating the constant on.
Okay. All right, do just a quick Mozambique on the 2 center ones.
How many shots do you want?
So 2 to the chest, 1 to the head on each of the center 2. Actually, scratch that. 2 to the chest, 1 to the head on each of the outer 2. Okay. Now I want to try what you're talking about. There's something up there. See that? Deer up there on the hillside. All right, major flex here, using reloading powder as our white balance. And let's get into this.